This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Tonight, U.S. election. Will Kamala Harris or Donald Trump become the 47th president of the United States?
Day 10 of Nova Scotia's campaign trail with targeted announcements and a surprise new candidate.
And back on his feet, a man who lived in the University Avenue tent encampment now has his own apartment.
A mild night and a warm Wednesday on tap across the province before this cold front brings us back to reality late week. Your full forecast is coming up.
Good evening. Decision Day has arrived in the United States. After an election campaign that saw the incumbent president drop out and his opponent face a would-be assassin's bullet, today Americans vote.
They do so amid expectations of a cliffhanger result and worries of possible violence. The CBC's Karen Pauls reports from Washington.
Around Washington, more barricades, more police presence, even some businesses boarded up. Concern about a repeat of the 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol by Trump supporters. There was a man arrested at the U.S. Capitol Visitor Center Tuesday. Police say he smelled like fuel.
We found a flare gun, a lighter, and a torch lighter in his jacket.
The National Guard has also been dispatched to many states. At some polling stations, there are metal detectors and police officers. Law enforcement using drones to monitor activity around polling places. There are even snipers on standby for deployment. Among those voting today, the Republican candidates for president and vice president, Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance. Trump says he's confident.
Look, I ran a great campaign. I think it was maybe the best of the three. Of course, there'll be no violence. My supporters are not violent people.
Vance and Trump will watch the election results from his home at Mar-a-Lago. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris is in Washington, getting briefings and doing some radio interviews. She and her running mate, Tim Walz, voted in advance polls. Walz stopped by a diner in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to encourage voters to vote in what he called a free and open election.
And I think the choice couldn't be starker. We saw the closing arguments of one of hopefulness, unity, and a focus on the middle class. The other one of dark, divisive, focused on himself.
Harris will host an election watch party on the campus where she went to school at Howard University. The race remains tight and results could be slow to come in, which means that even when the night ends, Americans still may not know who their next president will be. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Washington.
As Americans get out and vote today, their neighbors here in the north are keeping a close eye on this historic election. In the Halifax area, people are eager to see how things unfold. The CBC's Selena Alders spoke to people around the city today.
What's usually a popular study spot on campus will soon become a crowded room full of anticipation. Students at the University of King's College will gather here to see who will become the next president of the United States.
I'm trying to remain hopeful. I think it's kind of anxiety-inducing sometimes because of how much, I guess, the attitudes towards journalism and democracy and truth are riding on this specific election.
This journalism professor is helping organize the watch party.
Elections are sort of the bedrock of democracy, and if we like living in democracies and we want to sort of participate in the countries that we live in and have sort of this world that we like living in that we appreciate, paying attention to elections and paying attention to the powerful and how deciding who gets to have power is a really important thing.
She says her American students have all voted by mail, but they're feeling nervous about the outcome. One dual Canadian-American citizen living in Nova Scotia says he feels optimistic about a Kamala Harris win.
I think I'll feel relieved and excited and optimistic. I recall when Obama was elected, and I think I feel more excited now about Kamala Harris.
CBC News reached out to a similar organization called Republicans Overseas, but did not receive a response. Back at King's, students just hope everything will go smoothly this election day.
My hope would be that whatever outcome happens, it is fair and everyone can agree that it is fair.
Selena Alders, CBC News, Halifax.
All right, well, a dark and dreary kind of day in Nova Scotia, for sure.
But some warm weather to look forward to tomorrow.
Yeah, temperatures have been rising throughout the day, and they're going to pretty much remain steady or continue to rise depending on where you are through the overnight tonight. Here in the southwest, this is pretty much where we're going to stay in the 11, 12, 13 range. In through Cape Breton and eastern parts of the mainland, temperatures will continue to rise through this evening into the early overnight. Expecting with these warm temps, we are going to see some fog patches. The showers moving out and to the east, and by the time we get to tomorrow morning, expecting to be dry. We'll see a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow. Don't be surprised if the clouds do dominate at times, but some solid sunny breaks and that front to our north. So that will continue to allow that southwest wind to move in the mild temperatures. Few late day showers, late afternoon into the early evening, especially for Cape Breton and the eastern mainland. But look at these temperatures again. Widespread 17 to 19 degrees. A little cooler in those onshore winds, and note the southwest wind. Sustained near 30, gusting 40 to 50 kilometers per hour. And we could even see some gusts near 60 here. Bay of Fundy, Tantramar Marsh area, Cobequid Bay. So just a heads up on that. It is going to be a breezy day, but a mild one for sure. And then for Thursday, the front has moved off to the south. Still hanging on to some mild temperatures here just on the tail end of that front, but overall we're going to be more like in the 10 to 14 range across the province on Thursday. Even cooler for the weekend. We'll talk about that with your full 7-day forecast in just a few minutes. Tom and Amy.
Do stay tuned. All right,
Thanks,
Ryan, thanks so much.
Thank you.
To our local election now, where Nova Scotia's three main political party leaders are on day 10 of the campaign trail. There were targeted announcements today, along with a surprise new candidate. PC leader Tim Houston said today his party would cover the cost of the shingles vaccine for everyone 65 and older.
We have the tools to fight shingles with a vaccine available that can reduce or eliminate the symptoms of this disease, but too many of our seniors do not get the vaccine because of the cost. Well, that's not good enough for me.
PCs say the initial cost of the promise would be $27 million, but that would drop as the current seniors population is vaccinated. NDP leader Claudia Chender announced that her party would create a compliance and enforcement unit for resolving tenant-landlord disputes.
Far too often, renters have to fight large landlords who often have a team of lawyers at their disposal. The disparity in power is huge. There is no balance. The current system isn't balanced or fair.
Chender says the system would provide protection to renters and small landlords dealing with challenges. Meanwhile, Liberal leader Zach Churchill announced that former Green Party leader Thomas Trappenberg will now run as a candidate for the Liberals. Trappenberg says he saw themes from his former party in the Liberal platform.
The fact that actually green values run through the whole document. It affects everything. It affects how we build our environments and how we build our economy.
This will mark Trappenberg's 12th election campaign.
A law firm is asking party leaders to commit to a right to a healthy environment during the provincial election. The CBC's Luke Ettinger explains.
East Coast Environmental Law is hoping to see support for legislation that could make a right to a healthy environment a fundamental human right. An environmental bill of rights would also give the government a legal responsibility to protect the environment for present and future generations.
What we're doing with this campaign is really to put out there an idea, a vision that in many ways is idealistic, but that we know a lot of people agree with, and that we hope many more would agree with and support if they were able to learn more about it.
NDP leader Claudia Chender says her party has long supported the idea.
We introduced the legislation, and our pitch is climate change is real. Let's all acknowledge that and let's act accordingly.
The Greens also support the proposal. In a statement, leader Anthony Edmonds said elected Green MLAs would look to make knowledge holders to help shape the legislation. On Tuesday, the Liberals introduced former Green leader Thomas Trappenberg as a candidate in Sackville-Uniacke. And the party has also expressed support for an environmental Bill of Rights after leader Zach Churchill said he wasn't aware of the proposal a day earlier.
We have a clear track record on prioritizing our environment, making sure we're doing our part to reduce emissions and green our grid and protect our coast.
When asked about support for an environmental Bill of Rights, PC leader Tim Houston said his party has taken other steps like protecting Owl's Head and legislating environmental goals.
It depends what it is. I mean, look, I think our track record of listening to Nova Scotians is obvious.
Regardless of who is elected to form government on November 26th, Northrop says the issues of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution need to be addressed.
The occasional political infighting that we see, the more of that happens, the less opportunity we'll have to actually get real momentum on addressing these issues.
However, environmental issues appear to rank low on the minds of voters in this election. Abacus data polling released on Saturday shows healthcare, affordability, and housing are the top 3 issues for voters. Luke Ettinger, CBC News, Halifax.
Police are saying more tonight about 2 suspicious deaths that happened in Cole Harbour yesterday morning. Officers say the remains of a 72-year-old man and a 71-year-old woman were found inside a home on Poplar Drive. RCMP said in a news release that the woman's death was the result of a homicide, while the man died as a result of self-inflicted wounds. Police say he was responsible for the woman's death and are calling it an incident of intimate partner violence.
A volunteer in Cape Breton is having trouble collecting enough canned and powdered milk for the Glace Bay Food Bank. Last year, he was able to round up 8,000 cans, but as Kyle Moore found out, this year's support has dropped off in a big way.
With just a couple of days left to donate, Mickey McNeil is hoping canned milk will soon come pouring in.
We are way down.
McNeil has been collecting canned and powdered milk for the food bank for more than 10 years now, hoping to help provide families with at least this basic necessity. Dairy Island PEI has donated a pallet of milk, and so has a local company, but donations don't compare to this time last year.
We're approximately 2 pallets behind where we were last year, and that's not counting the donations that get dropped off at the arena. So we would be, I'd say it would be an easy 5,000 cans behind right now.
That's a concern for Glace Bay Food Bank coordinator Linda McRae.
When you hear that kids are putting water on their cereal or adults are using water instead of milk, the canned milk is very, very important.
McRae says the food bank feeds 110 people a day and gives out more than 400 food hampers a month. She says those numbers will only rise as the temperature gets colder.
There's heating bills now for people to worry about. There's more things on their plates. So it's important to get food and things like this all year. But we're getting into the winter now, and people are going to be struggling even more.
McNeil says he was able to collect 8,000 cans of milk last year with the help of businesses and the community. He feels people just can't afford to donate the way they once did.
If everybody was to drop off 1 can of milk, it would make a difference. So if you cannot afford to buy a dozen cans or whatever, if you come here with 2 cans of milk, don't think of it as a small donation. Think of it as a donation.
Donations can be dropped off here at the Glace Bay Miners Forum or at the food bank. The milk drive ends on Saturday. Kyle Moore, CBC News, Glace Bay.
The deadline for people to leave a designated homeless encampment in downtown Halifax has arrived. The municipality closed the University Avenue site this fall, where after 30 people were living. Those living there had until last Friday to leave, but a few people remain. Halifax says the closure was needed to protect camp residents from snow and ice removal.
We have about 9 people who are still there. Some of them we're working with on an option that will become available to them in the next few days. And so we're working on that. And that's what it is right now, is working one-on-one with those last folks to find out what might work, where could they go, what option would best meet their needs, and to sort of finish those up and help those people relocate.
There are still more than 100 people sleeping rough in designated and undesignated sites around Halifax.
And as that encampment site is now closing, one man who was living there is sharing his story of how he moved on.
From living in a tent for 2 years to moving into a new apartment last month, he says the shift is life-changing. Nicholas Sagan has a story.
How does it feel to have a roof over your head for the first time in 2 years? Jesse Vincent knows the answer.
I get to wake up and everything's different now. I can get up and walk around, open the window, breathe fresh air, make a coffee, make food. Everything's easy now. I'm really, really lucky.
Vincent went from living here to here. He recently packed up his tent and moved into a one-bedroom apartment owned by Shelter Nova Scotia. He says his path changed one day when he gave out his number.
I saw the Downtown Business Association was doing some work on a garden on Spring Garden Road, and I just offered my phone number to see if there was any work I could get.
Vincent started working 6 hours a week cleaning up Spring Garden Road in July, and last month he got the news that street outreach workers had found him an apartment.
Just walking through the door today to see the space and see the big smile on his face and see how much more space he has than he did. It's warm, he's got a bed. When he stands up, he doesn't have to crouch down.
Goltz has been helping people like Vincent move on from living in encampments. He says some have gone to new tiny homes and supportive housing around the city, but there's still work to be done.
Homelessness and poverty here in Nova Scotia is still an issue. It'll be interesting to see if we can keep up with it. I still have people calling me all the time, elderly people, single moms who are needing housing, are on the precipice of just losing their housing.
As for Vincent, he can finally dare to plan ahead.
Just start saving money last night. I saved $10. It's a start.
Yeah, that's really a huge difference.
Yeah, I want to do something. I want to buy a guitar.
As he starts to build a home for the first time in years, Vincent hopes others from encampments around the city can soon come out of the cold too. Nicholas Sagan, CBC News, Halifax.
Well, we got some much needed rain at some points today.
Sure did.
That's in Halifax. Ryan's up next with this full weather forecast. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Yeah, well, it's been a little wet and gray today, but we can't exactly complain because we've been doing pretty well.
What do you want to bet we'll see folks in shorts tomorrow?
Could be, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we will. I was just looking over the records for tomorrow, so it doesn't look like we'll set records. There's a couple of spots that are going to be in play, mainly Cape Breton. But it does look like, the records that most of which for tomorrow's date, November 6th, were set back in 2022, where we had widespread low 20 temperatures. So a warm up like this, not, out of the question for this time of year. Have a look at current temperatures right now. We have been bumping up, no question. 6 to 9 degrees across Cape Breton right now. We're into the double digits across most of the mainland. That Caribou Point Station, Antigonish, still hanging on to the high single digits there. And we're up to 13 in Shelburne right now. The wind is going to be a big story. It's going to be breezy all night tonight, sustained in the 15 to 20 range, a little stronger along parts of the coast. And those gusts are going to be in that 30 to 40 kilometer per hour range. We are seeing a gust just shy of that right now in Sydney. Tomorrow, the winds are going to get breezier as that front does continue to move in. So warm front here moving through, and we are looking at that shower activity that's been moving through as well today. What we're going to get into here is this little dry slot as that front moves off towards Newfoundland and Labrador, and we are going to get into this, drier air for tomorrow, which will set up to be a pretty favorable day. Again, the winds are going to be the biggest hindrance to enjoying the day. There's the front, which stretches basically from James Bay all the way down through into the Gulf of Mexico, and you can see this cold air plunging again down into the U.S. Salt Lake City just at 4, Denver's at 11, Houston's at 27, and you can see temperatures here out west in closer to home in Canada, looking at Calgary just at the freezing mark right now. So this is the push and pull we see, right? And temperatures will continue to kind of surge here into the northeast parts of the U.S. and into our area as we move through into tomorrow. So overnight lows tonight, pretty much where we stand now. They're just going to be consistently in those double digits, low double digits, southwest winds gusting to 40. Let's walk you through the timeline, and you can see those showers will continue to sail through along this frontal boundary this evening. The greatest risk is going to be the eastern half of the mainland and for Cape Breton. That will then lift off and to the east by the time we get to Wednesday morning. A favorable start. We'll see some fog patches, and then we're looking at that cloud to be, I think, fairly dominant at times, but some sunny breaks expected, a little more so than what this in-house model is showing. By the time we get to 5 p.m., the risk for showers certainly extending into Cape Breton and the Northumberland shore. I think this model is a bit bullish on how far south they are for eastern parts of the mainland, but not ruling out a late day risk from Amherst to Truro and into the, say, Sheet Harbor area. That'll be the greatest risk of a shower before supper time tomorrow. Can't rule it out. Certainly the greatest risk, as I said, is going to be for Cape Breton tomorrow. The winds gusting to 50 kilometers per hour here. Temperatures in Cape Breton ranging between around 15 and 18 degrees. So again, keeping the shower risk off the icons here, but again, Amherst, Tatamagouche, Truro, Sheet Harbor, New Glasgow, all with that risk of a shower into the afternoon tomorrow, perhaps down towards Parsboro as well. The rest of us waiting certainly until supper and beyond. At least that's where the bulk of the guidance is holding right now. Temperatures, again, very mild in through the west tomorrow as well. We will see those onshore winds near 16 for the Tri-County area. So there's the front. And again, this is where the kind of the consensus is where that shower activity will be as of Wednesday evening. Then that front sinks south. Not a lot of precipitation with it again. And again, folks, really, everybody knows we need the rain here. Thursday morning, front still hanging on to the southwest, so some milder temperatures there, and maybe an isolated shower here in the southwest. I did put it in for Yarmouth. Slight risk for Bridgewater as well, and a slight risk in through Cape Breton on Thursday as well, primarily for Inverness and into Victoria counties. Temperatures kind of widespread 10 to 14, a little bit milder possibly down here and through the south and west. And then we've got this another weak system coming in for Friday that'll briefly help our temperatures bumping up a little bit with a few showers, and then in behind that front, temperatures are going to be even cooler for the weekend. Mid-single digits on Saturday. Could see a few flakes flying in places like Cape Breton and eastern parts of the mainland, much like we had this morning, Tom and Amy. I should have mentioned that right off the top. We did have some flurries flying in eastern parts of the mainland this morning. Some drivers saw that. So that's back in play for Saturday. And as you saw there, Remembrance Day right now, maybe looking a bit damp, but fingers crossed, lots of time for that to change.
All right,
Yes, let's
fingers
hope.
crossed. Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Coming up, a Dalhousie political science professor weighs in on the U.S. election. That's our newsmaker. Polls show the Republican and Democratic presidential candidates are in a neck-and-neck battle as voters continue to cast ballots today in the U.S. election. Robert Hewish is a political scientist at Dalhousie University here with us in studio. Thanks so much for coming in.
Good to see you, Tom.
Here we are back again, another U.S. election where it is so tight. And yet, can you really say that there's ever been an election campaign quite like this in the United States?
No, never, because there's never been one so emotionally charged about a decision that comes down not just to about foreign policy issues or tax issues or climate issues. The sort of nexus of this entire election is how Americans see themselves as Americans, right? There's Kamala Harris's vision of neighbors helping neighbors, wide inclusivity about, there's just no limit to who can become an American. Mr. Trump is very much the opposite of that. There's a very narrow America First vision of who qualifies to be an American. And the question that will be today is how many people going to the polls are going to say, well, does that vision apply to me? And the more, say, younger, diverse, and women voters that we see coming out of the polls and they're standing in the election lines, that might give us an indication of where we're going.
Well, let me ask you about that, because the pollsters have said this race has been so close for so long. Are you seeing anything in terms of an indication that momentum might change one way or the other for either party?
It's certainly swung a couple times during this election. Of course, initially the plan was to have President Joe Biden on the ticket, and it looked like that was pretty much giving the election to Mr. Trump. Now there was sort of the October saw Trump sort of make some gains for whatever reason. And now in the last couple days, there's been a lot of talk that polls are now favoring Vice President Harris. The question is, where is that favoring taking place? Is it coming down in key states like Pennsylvania, North Carolina? Georgia is another state to watch as well. The smaller states, we can see it happen either way, but those key battlegrounds, which basically are the states that gave the presidency to Mr. Trump before Mr. Biden, those are the ones to watch.
And it could very well be that we don't know the final result tonight. It could be some days. What are you were mentioning just off air here about your concerns or what you're hearing, how this could get dragged out much longer than maybe people might like it to.
Exactly. So there's one issue about counting all the votes. That's the first job, to get the votes tallied, counted, and figure out that every vote counts. Now that's the one issue. But then once that ends, then the whole process gets going to try to certify the votes. You have to do it at the county level, it's about to be approved at the state level, and then up to Congress itself. So between now and the beginning of January, there's a whole bunch of legislative processes that go into basically certifying that this election is valid. Now, Mr. Trump's supporters already have an architecture in place to try to disrupt that, down to county levels, down to various polling stations. And if that is successful, we're going to see a lot of uncertainty and back and forth and political turmoil, to be honest, over the next few weeks.
So, I suppose it could happen as well that maybe on the off chance, early indications may come in that this is a more convincing win for someone than the other, if you don't believe the polls. For that to happen, what would you be expecting to seeing early on in the night?
So the stat I've been going at all day, Tom, and that's kind of worrying, is that 3/4 of Americans, according to some polls, are expecting some form of election violence. And that's really, really concerning. And then another poll indicates that about 1/5 of Mr. Trump's supporters, so about 20% of Mr. Trump's supporters, would justify or feel comfortable using violence to get their candidate into the White House. So that's really troubling, because it's setting a precedent that violence and disruption can now be part of one of the most core American values, which is the election process itself. And I would hope that no matter what happens here, that this time around, that the authorities at county, state, and even federal levels, they're more prepared for that kind of a reaction if that's what comes.
Can you talk a little bit about the effort to get the vote out? Because it does really sound like, it being so close, that it really is going to be who can pull the vote the best.
Exactly. And we know Mr. Trump's methods, right? The big rallies and who's been catered to the most in his audience. The big difference in this election compared to, say, when Clinton ran for president, is how the Democrats have really captured social media, right? Vice President Harris has been a sensation all over TikTok. Youth voters are finding quite a bit of affinity with her message. And they've been able to really get that message out on campuses, especially across the U.S., and the question is, will that result in a higher voter turnout? I would like to think that there is. There's certainly a lot of youth movement issues. There's political issues around the world that many youth are very concerned about, notably the war in Israel and Gaza, that many youth are saying we can't support the Biden administration or VP Harris as a result. But will that be enough for them to say, but if we don't vote, would this mean Mr. Trump getting the White House again?
So much to watch for tonight. Robert Hewish, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Coming up, we check in with voters in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, two battleground states that could determine the U.S. election.
Ottawa hears from community groups about a controversial motion for the Canadian government to recognize Palestinian statehood. Welcome back. We continue our coverage of the U.S. election. Pollsters forecast the race in the must-win state of Pennsylvania as a virtual tie between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
Outside one polling station in the small town of Bensalem, it's easy to see why. Richard Madden is there with a look at how voters are divided.
Well, voting is underway in one of the swingiest counties in one of the swingiest of swing states that's up for grabs. We're here in the Philadelphia suburbs of Bucks County. Voters here could very well determine who wins Pennsylvania and therefore possibly the election. We're told voting has been fairly steady throughout the day. The lineups haven't been too long, but interest is high, and they even have soft pretzels to satisfy some of these hungry voters. Now, officials have said turnout has been steady, voting has been going smoothly, and voters we spoke to here appear to be just as divided as the polls suggest.
I voted for Kamala because I think it's time to lift the glass ceiling, and I think it's great that my one and only granddaughter gets the opportunity to see that a woman can rule this country.
She's not run any kind of company whatsoever. So Trump he's had successes, he's had failures, but you know what? The guy has experience, and that is where I think this country needs to be.
I think there's a difference between what we know as traditional Republicans and what's now being called the MAGA Republicans. So, I'm not in that camp. I think they pretty much kind of like hijacked the party.
Uncle Trump. Uncle Trump.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, just to underscore Pennsylvania's political importance, Vice President Kamala Harris ended her campaign in Philadelphia, holding a star-studded concert with celebrities urging voters to get out and vote. The path to the White House runs straight through this state. So now, Americans wait to learn how voters here decided. Richard Madden, CBC News, Bensalem, Pennsylvania.
In their final campaign blitz over the weekend, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump honed in on North Carolina. It's a state that the former president won in 2020 by less than 80,000 votes. And tonight, it could make all the difference between victory or defeat. Katie Nicholson is in Charlotte with more.
Now, North Carolina is a swing state. There are 16 electoral college votes up for grabs. The last time that a Democratic presidential nominee took this state was 2008. That was Barack Obama by a very tiny margin. And this state really is won usually by tiny margins. And there's a lot of data available this time around. It really shattered early voting records on Saturday. About 57% of registered voters have already cast a ballot. That's about 4.4 million. But even people who've been studying North Carolina politics for decades don't quite know what to make of it and can't really read the tea leaves. Here's Dr. Michael Bitzer. He's a political science professor here in North Carolina.
We've had 17 days worth of early votes, and I honestly cannot read the data coming out of it. It is an even split between registered Democrats, registered Republicans, and the biggest group, registered unaffiliateds, who are really the big question mark in this year's election.
Now, most analysts agree that this state is a must-win for Donald Trump in order to ensure a victory for him. For Kamala Harris, it would be a nice feather in her cap and certainly an insurance policy in case part of the blue wall starts to crumble. Either way, we're going to get a sense of which way North Carolina is going by about midnight tonight. That's because the election officials expect to have most of those unofficial results in by about 98% of them by midnight. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Charlotte, North Carolina.
A return to the White House by Donald Trump could mean uncertainty for European diplomacy. On trade, on international cooperation, and on Ukraine, Trump's statements have many observers concerned. Krista Gumansing has more from London.
When it comes to the economy, there are fears that Donald Trump would move ahead with that universal tariff on all American imports. That, if it is about 10%, would have a huge impact on the European economy. The EU says American imports are worth about $500 billion US. When it comes to having a stable, reliable partner, there is a lot of talk about how unpredictable Donald Trump was during his 4 years years in office. Kamala Harris is seen as someone who would be potentially more known, more stable, given that she would follow in the footsteps on many issues to Joe Biden, particularly when it comes to security and NATO. Donald Trump has said that he might not protect all of those in the alliance who don't commit to that 2% GDP spend when it comes to military spending. We did hear yesterday from NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in Germany offering some comforting words.
We will work with Kamala Harris, we will work with Donald Trump and make sure that the alliance stays united, because they know that if Putin would be successful in Ukraine, that at that moment an emboldened Russia is on our eastern flank and will present a direct threat to NATO territory.
Germany is the second largest contributor to weapons to Ukraine as it fights for its sovereignty. If the United States either chooses not to work with NATO in those typical defense measures, as Trump has suggested he might do, or if they choose to stop sending weapons to Ukraine, that would have a knock-on effect, and Europe at this point says it just can't meet that demand. Ultimately, it is in the hands of American voters. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Many people in the Middle East are holding their breath, waiting for the results of the U.S. presidential election. Arab media is reporting that many Gazans fear a victory for the Republican candidate Donald Trump could spell disaster for them. They fear his support of Israel could lead to more residents getting displaced. But in Israel, most people hope to see the former president return to the White House. Sasha Petrusik is in Jerusalem with a look at what's at stake for the region.
Most Israelis are pretty confident that they want Donald Trump back in the White House. They think that he was a good friend to Israel back when he was in power before, and they say that he will back Israelis fighting in the wars in Gaza and in Lebanon. That's because of several statements that he has made, and there's a feeling that he just doesn't want to get involved here. Polls that have been done in Israel suggest some 66% back Donald Trump, only about 17% back Kamala Harris. Why? Well, some say here that they just don't know her. They don't know how she's going to react. Others say that they feel she is somehow anti-Israel because she has raised humanitarian concerns and concerns about how many civilians are being killed in this fighting. In any case, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has made it very clear that he wants Donald Trump back in the White House. He wants to deal with him. I spoke to a former Israeli diplomat in New York who had this to say about how things would go with the two different candidates.
I think that both candidates, Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, and Donald Trump, would ask him to terminate the war as soon as possible. Now, if Trump asks him to do that, then he will reach some accommodation and announce a victory. If Kamala Harris does that, he will vie for a direct confrontation.
But what happens if Netanyahu does not end the war before Donald Trump takes office, if he wins the election? Well, that's what people here say they're unclear on, and they think that Trump is a little unpredictable that way. On some days, Trump has said that Netanyahu should do whatever you need to do, and has praised Israel for what he sees as victories in the war. On other days, he has told Netanyahu in no uncertain terms that Israel has to finish this war by January 20th, when Trump takes office if he is elected. And even if Kamala Harris wins, it's not clear if she will in fact take the same position that Joe Biden has, or if she'll take U.S.-Israeli relations in a whole different direction, which would have a huge impact on the whole Middle East. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
The federal government is signaling it's ready to work with the next president of the United States, no matter who gets elected tonight. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says Canada has been preparing for months.
We will be ready. We will let the American people decide who they want in the Oval Office. Meanwhile, we've been preparing for this for months through our diplomatic network across the U.S., but also around the world. And so you can rest assured that this government is going to be able to address issues that are important to Canadians, notwithstanding who the American people will decide.
As you've been hearing, today's election is being watched closely all around the world, perhaps no closer than in one small corner of India, with strong ties to Kamala Harris. A Hindu priest has been saying prayers, lighting incense, and offering flowers and bananas in the village where Harris's maternal grandfather was born more than a century ago. Messages of good luck, as well as signs claiming the Democratic candidate as one of their own, are also on display. Harris's mother was also born in India, and Kamala means lotus flower in the Sanskrit language.
A group of MPs held hearings today on an issue that could not be more angrily contested, recognizing a Palestinian state. Today, there were arguments from community groups on both sides of the issue. Rafi Boudjikanian reports.
The committee is resuming its study of Canada's advancement of a two-state solution.
It was a proposal so controversial, the Liberal government MPs who presented it initially did so behind closed doors. But today, the emotions were out in the open.
As a Palestinian today, I feel we've overlong due waited. We suffered so long. We paid the price for being recognized.
Until Palestinians can wrap their heads around and accept the legitimacy of a Jewish state as their neighbor, we are condemning the region to conflict.
For decades, successive Canadian governments have maintained a Palestinian state should only be recognized after a negotiation process between Israel and Palestinian leaders, leading to peace between the two sides. Earlier this year, following months of deadly war between Israel and Hamas in and around Gaza that's seen tens of thousands of Palestinians killed, there was a change.
We now recognize that it may happen sooner than at the end of the process as a way of pushing towards that two-state solution.
But such a move would amount to rewarding Hamas, say many Jewish advocacy groups, for the attack the militant organization launched in October of last year, killing 1,200 people in Israel and taking some 250 others hostage.
I think that any state which wishes to be formed, and the basis for that formation has been an act whereby its citizens, including UNRWA employees, go in, burn, rape, mutilate, and butcher people. I don't think they're quite yet ready.
Others, though, accuse Canada's silence on statehood so far of contributing to what they call impunity for years of occupation.
And we believe that Canada's recognition of a Palestinian state would constitute an important step toward actualizing the right of Palestinians to self-determination.
This UN expert says that would indeed be just a first step. Her description of Israel's actions have landed her in hot water with the country's officials and many Jewish groups.
Is Canada spending any of its political capital to make sure that the genocide ends as soon as possible?
Officials from the Foreign Affairs Department will be meeting with the MPs studying statehood later this week. Rafi Boudjikanian on CBC News, Ottawa.
Strength in base metal stocks helped boost Canada's main stock index today, while U.S. markets also climbed as Americans headed to the polls. Here's a look at where things closed. talking election during the break. Everyone's talking election.
Yep.
What a day this has turned out to be and will be tonight.
We'll be watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a mild night tonight, and then tomorrow very, very mild, which is, a contrast from what we've been seeing. A few frosty mornings lately, not this morning, but a couple of mornings ago, I believe is when this picture was taken. Could even be yesterday morning. This one back to Cape Breton, and have a look at this.
Oh, some visitors.
Some wildlife
Nice.
there, yeah.
Judy says that these three often visiting.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, and you can see the frost on the grass there. Beautiful sunrise shot. Perhaps that's the one good thing about the time change is, we got the nice sunrises that are a little bit earlier for you. You don't have to wait as long for the sun to come up right now. Judy, thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so Cape Breton tomorrow, temperatures right around 18 degrees. We'll see most of the mainland between 16 and 19, a little bit cooler in that Tri-County area with that onshore flow. The winds are going to be breezy tomorrow. We're going to be gusting 40 and 50 kilometers per hour. Tantramar Marsh, Amherst, especially in and around the Cobequid Bay area as well, could see some gusts there that do push up closer to 60. So it will be a breezy one for sure. Looking at that increasing clouds late day with a chance of a late day shower in the northeast. Cape Breton, the greatest risk. And then again, isolated shower chances in Cape Breton on Thursday, primarily on the Inverness County side. Looking at an isolated risk down towards Yarmouth as well. Let's just jump right to the 7-day forecast because there's a lot to talk about with this. So we've got a chance for a few flakes in the mix again on Saturday, much like we had this morning in the east. We'll see that risk again for Cape Breton and eastern parts of the mainland. There is a chance for showers on Monday right now, but fingers crossed, lots of time.
We shall see.
Yeah.
All right, some incredible new images to show you from Newfoundland. They show underwater wrecks from the Second World War.
Divers from around the world come to Conception Bay to see 4 wrecks that are close to shore and well preserved. The ships were loaded with iron ore when they were torpedoed and sunk by German U-boats in 1942. A pair of divers and their underwater drone found an open hatch on one of the ships.
Other images show a German torpedo. Its battery power pack is fully exposed, but the warhead is missing. And gauges are still readable in the wireless room of one ship, and from disaster, new life has emerged. The ship's now artificial reefs brimming with sea life.
Wow.
Very cool.
That is impressive. All right, that's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.